What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. Always appreciate it. Have two more Packer rookies to break down in great detail today. Two seventh-round picks, including Tariq Carpenter and Jonathan Ford. Excited to kind of go over both of them with you. However, I will be upfront and forward in saying not the hugest fan of either of these two players on tape. I do think I understand what the scouting staff and Brian Gutekunst were trying to accomplish here, which we'll get to more in just a moment. But maybe one of the most surprising things of this entire Packers draft is the fact that they actually valued these two seventh-round picks, Tariq Carpenter and Jonathan Ford, ahead of Samori Toure and Rasheed Walker, who I think have far more upside and far better tape than either Tariq Carpenter or Jonathan Ford. If you would have told me that they took Rasheed Walker and Toure first, and then maybe Carpenter and then Jonathan Ford at the end, I probably would have understood it maybe a little bit better, but neither here nor there. They got all four players anyway, so it doesn't really matter all that much. But let's kick things off with Tariq Carpenter, who will turn 24 years old in December. He is a safety linebacker hybrid, although it seems like Green Bay is going to give him a chance at safety first and then maybe see what he can do in a hybrid role, maybe eventually move to linebacker. We will wait and see. But he is 6'3", 230 pounds, a senior out of Georgia Tech. If you play him at a linebacker, he's in the 89th percentile as an athlete at that position. If you play him as a safety, he's in the 90th percentile as a safety at this position. And this is ultimately why Tariq Carpenter was drafted in the 7th round. And really, we're going to talk about both of these players. And Jonathan Ford doesn't quite have the traits that Tariq Carpenter does, but both of these players have poor tape. I'm just going to say it is what it is. Neither of their tape you're going to go watch and be like, holy cow, like there is a lot to love here. There is a lot that you don't like from either player's tape, but specifically when it comes to Tariq Carpenter, we'll go over why with Jonathan Ford in just a moment, but specifically with Tariq Carpenter, the reason that he's drafted is because he has high-end athleticism with just about everything except for his agility. 35th percentile in the short shuttle, 18th percentile in the 3-cone. That's at linebacker. He's even testing poorly agility-wise as a linebacker. As a safety, he was in the 21st percentile for the short shuttle and in the 6th percentile for the 3-cone as a safety. His agility is incredibly poor, and that shows up on tape as well. But outside of that, he's a 4'5", 240 guy at 6'2", 6'3", 230 pounds. He's in the 96th percentile for his vertical. He's in the 99th percentile for his broad jump, 85th percentile for height. These are at the linebacker spots, but you can start getting a feel for why the Green Bay felt so good about him. And when he flashes on tape, when he shows what he's capable of doing, you see that speed, that intensity, that violence. He is a strong, fast, tall, physical player when he's playing at his best. But agility is an issue, position is an issue, tape is an issue. Those are things we'll all get into. So let's go what his positives are, right? So he is a size, speed, strength player. All right, you're always looking for that, right? You will hear scouts and GMs all the time, size, speed, strength, the 3 S's. You want guys on your team who have great size, great speed, great strength. You simply cannot get enough of those players on your offense, on your defense, on your special teams. These are guys lined up against the fence, and you point to them and you're like, I want that guy because he's big, tall, fast, physical. Those are the guys you want, right? So this is why he's ultimately on the team. And I know I say this a lot, especially with Packer draftees, because this is something that's very important to them, but he looks the part. Again, line him up on the fence at recess, and this is the guy that you're taking. He looks fast, he looks physical, he looks tall, and again, he looks like somebody that you want on your team, whether you're out at recess or whether you're trying to take on the Chicago Bears. So that is, again, a huge part of why he is a 7th-round pick in this situation. He also projects as a core special teams player. This has Rich Bisaccia written all over it, right? So you're hoping that you can find a player in the 7th round that has some, let's say athleticism and some moldable traits that maybe he could play some safety, maybe he could play some linebacker, who in the meantime is going to make his name on special teams and be a demon on special teams. We know that Green Bay needs to show massive improvement here. And when, again, you have somebody who is 6'3", 230 pounds, who has great size, great physicality, and great speed, that is somebody that you can use on special teams. This screams to me, again, somebody that they are hoping can come in and earn his job there while they sort of train him maybe on that hybrid safety linebacker role, or try to get him to do a couple things that, they would specifically like him to do within this Joe Barry defense. He also potentially has the ability to play that hybrid role in Joe Barry's defense, right? These are very tough players to find. Players who have that size, have that speed, and can maybe cover some tight ends who are a little bit taller at that linebacker position, right? Those are very tough players to find. And if you can find somebody who has enough size and length and speed to be able to maybe cover a Travis Kelce with some level of consistency at the linebacker spot, even if it's a hybrid linebacker, those players have a lot of value. The biggest mismatch right now that most teams have offensively is either a running back who can motion out, and if you get him matched up on a linebacker or even a corner, he has the ability to beat you clean. Think of Christian McCaffrey in his prime, right? Or the Travis Kelce's, Rob Gronkowski's, those players in their prime, right? Those are like, you take a Travis Kelce and you get a safety on him. And if it's like a Darnell Savage, they're just not big enough. If it's a corner, they're just not big enough. A lot of safeties, even if they are matched up one-on-one, maybe don't have the, pure coverage skills to be able to match up with that sort of player. And linebacker, probably not fast enough. And again, you're wondering if the coverage skills are good enough. So if you have that tweener player and you can weaponize him as to do, have one thing that he could do well and maybe match up against some of these bigger, more physical tight ends, then they have value. So I think that's why Green Bay is going for this is, again, you don't find many players with this size, this strength, this speed, and the potential to be in that hybrid linebacker role to maybe cover some of these tight ends. And he did show a couple plays on tape where he could cover some tight ends and show that skill set. I think he's going to have to improve at it, which we'll get to more in just a moment. But again, these players are hard to find. Again, I think Green Bay's taking the traits and ball of clay approach here and saying, hey, we think he can be good on special teams immediately. And in the meantime, we'll take all of this raw ball of clay and mold it into something that we can actually use on defense. He's a very hard hitter. If he can get in that hybrid role, I actually do think he fits within this Joe Barry zone defense that he's had a lot of success with. I think he can be a good zone defender. I question his man cover skills, but I'm not ruling it out. And if he can get to that point, I think he can be a very good fit within Joe Barry's defense. I think there's a chance that he could be much better as a linebacker. So even though some of his tape, he's really struggling at safety, I think there's a chance, right, that you maybe move him to a new position, maybe have him put on some functional strength, and all of a sudden he becomes a much better linebacker than he ever was at safety. I'm sure that's partially what Green Bay is hoping for here. He's at his best when he's running from point A to point B with speed and physicality. And again, talk about what you want on special teams, point A, point B, speed, physicality. That's basically it in a nutshell. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but you get my point. He also has 4 seasons as a starter. He shows some ability to shed blocks, even against offensive linemen, which again, if you're transitioning him to linebacker, that's exactly what you want. He has good range at linebacker. Safety, again, is questionable because, again, you need that agility. You need to take good angles. But at linebacker, he should have pretty close to sideline speed at that position. And he does have double-digit career tackles on special teams, which clearly is going to be important for him as well. Now, his weaknesses, his tape's not great. His Pittsburgh tape this season, the All-22, is beyond brutal. Don't watch it. You will be begging for a Kentrell Bryce or a Henry Black to come back before you would want what tape that Tariq Carpenter put on tape against the University of Pittsburgh this last season. So there is a lot still to be desired from his overall production and what he put on tape during his time at Georgia Tech. Again, his agility and change of direction is really poor. He's very tight in the hips. And again, that's going to limit his man coverage ability as well. His coverage was very tough to watch at times, missed assignments, lacking man coverage skills, gave up 4 touchdowns in coverage this past season. Was very apparent that that was not a skill of his game at safety. Now, again, expectations change at linebacker, and if you turn him into a zone coverage linebacker, I do think he has the ability to do that. But at safety, whether it was man, whether it was zone, whatever it was asked of him, he struggled in coverage. His tackling form is also very poor. He likes to lay a big hit, but he needs to wrap up better. He needs to be much more consistent. He likes to fly in out of control. He needs to calm that down and be a much more conservative tackler so that he's making sure that he's making the safe tackle, especially if he's playing at safety. But at linebacker, you just can't miss tackles. There are too many missed tackles where he's trying to do too much on tape. Calm it down. You're a big, strong physical player. Just make the simple tackle and get the guy to the ground. He's got to do a much better job of that. He also didn't show growth at Georgia Tech throughout his time. In fact, I think you could actually make an argument that he regressed a little bit over his time at Georgia Tech. You didn't also see consistent effort from him, which I hate. There was a little bit of haha Clinton Dix where maybe he wasn't running through the play. We talked about with all the defenders so far that Green Bay has drafted where they're players who rally to the football. I would have liked to have seen more from that out of Carpenter. And while he projects as this core special teams player, he hasn't played on the coverage units on special teams in the last 2 seasons. So it's not like he's this well-versed special teams tackling machine. Yes, he showed it earlier in his career, but the last 2 years he wasn't on coverage units. So that's going to be something that he has to sort of relearn and re-pick up. Overall, I see him as a taller Josh Jones, both the good and the bad. You see the physicality, you see the size, but you're not sure what part he's going to play. Some of the mental processing and some of the effort wasn't always great. So I see him as a taller Josh Jones, again, good and bad. I think he needs to be a special teams demon if he wants to make a true impact and make this team. Green Bay's clearly hoping they can unlock some of his potential. Maybe that move to linebacker that could help. And what you're hoping is that you're taking a chance on finding a player that is tough to find and you can mold him into making him a specialty player, right? A role player as a maybe zone hybrid linebacker who can cover the middle a little bit, be a special teams guy, and maybe if he develops, maybe be used a little bit against tight ends in coverage. I question if he can ever get to that point. I question his upside, but there are tools there that you can't teach, and I can understand why Green Bay wanted to take a flyer on that type of player in the 7th round while also hoping he can be a core special teams player in the meantime. All right, let's jump over to Jonathan Ford, who also has some very questionable tape. Also turns 24 this season, so he'll be 24 in September. 6'5", 333 pounds out of the University of Miami. 35th percentile athlete, by far the worst athlete that Green Bay selected in this year's draft. He is, again, 6'5", 333, so he has great size overall, 95th percentile height, 95th percentile weight. Everything else he pretty much tested poor at. 48th percentile in the bench press, 58th percentile in the vert, which is good, 39th percentile in the broad jump, the 6th percentile in the 40-yard dash, and the 10th percentile in the short shuttle. So not a great athlete here either. The positives are pretty minimal. Not a bad first step off the line, especially if you're talking about a 333-pounder. Now, if you're talking about a 10-yard split that's in the 23rd percentile, you might be saying like, Andy, you sure about that? But overall, again, for a guy that's 333 pounds, you look at him and he moves better than you would expect him to. Again, he's a massive human at 6'5", 333, putting him in the category of they just don't make many human beings that size that have a quick first step, that show some ability to penetrate into the backfield. So that's what Green Bay is taking here, is just, again, somebody who you don't find very many of, and you're hoping you can specialize him a little bit. He did flash an ability to split a double team here and again, and he did look much more spry earlier in his career. In fact, all 3 of his sacks came from 2019 when he was playing at a lighter weight and looked much more agile and spry at that point. Looked to be much better, a much more disruptive player at that point in his career. And I guess the only other positive thing you can really say here is that he was a 3-year starter at the University of Miami as well. Now, the negatives add up pretty quickly. He has almost no production. The tape is bad. 3 sacks in his entire career, and all of those came in 2019. And one of them he basically lucked into. He's going to give you nothing as a pass rusher. I mean, next to nothing as a pass rusher. That's certainly not why you're bringing him in. He is blocked far too easily by opposing offensive linemen. He has no plan of attack. He plays far too upright and with poor pad level. He has completely limited upside because he can't ever really probably develop into a core pass rusher. At best, he becomes a really good run defender. He turns 24 in September, so it's not like he's 20 years old and you're hoping like he has a lot of, developmental time left. His momentum gets used against him at times, so he doesn't play totally under control. He has to find a way to hold his ground better and play better at the point of attack. He wasn't even a staple on Miami's defense on goal line plays. You have a 333-pound defensive tackle whose specialty is run stuffing, and they didn't even use him as a run stuffer on goal line plays. That should tell you a lot. He was on the ground way too often, had showed poor balance because of that. Didn't always have the vision and wherewithal to know what the offense was trying to do and keep his eyes up and try to make sure that he was stopping the play and doing his job on that specific play. And he does not shed blocks and make plays. So if he is blocked, he's not going to shed it and he's not going to go make that play. That's a lot of negatives for a player. So what is Green Bay exactly hoping for here? A, They're hoping that the light bulb goes off and that he realizes that he is a 6'5", 333-pound human being who has a quick first step and should not be blocked that easy and should hold up at the point of attack much better. He didn't do that at Miami in 3 years as a starter. So my hope that he can do that in the NFL against NFL level blocking is very minimal. But Green Bay's hoping that they found this big, physical, tall, strong, thick player that they can use as a run stuffing defensive tackle, and not the light bulb is going to go off now that he's a professional in the NFL. The number two thing that you're hoping for is that, can you specialize him? And what I mean by that is, don't put him out there at defensive tackle and say, hey, you might be pass rushing on this play, you might be run stopping, you might be twisting, you might be stunting. Screw all of that. Just say you're 6'5", or 6'5", 333 pounds. You are going out there to fill that gap. Just fill that gap and keep Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker clean. If you can do that, you don't ever have to get a sack. You don't ever have to get a pressure. You don't ever have to get a tackle for loss. Just eat the offensive lineman in front of you. Don't let them push you back. Hold your gap, hold your point of attack, use your long arms to, help bring the guy down, but you're just trying to set up the two linebackers behind you. Can you do that? We don't need you to do anything else. You're basically Tyler Lancastering them, right? We don't need you to get sacks. We don't need you to get penetration. We don't need you to be a disruptor. We just need you to be a massive human being that the opposing offensive line cannot move. Don't worry about anything else. This is your only focus. And if you can make him focused on that one thing, can he become that one thing? Because if he can become a 6'5", 333-pound defensive tackle that you can't move, yeah, maybe that only has value on 20 snaps per game, but that has a lot of value on those 20 snaps. And again, in the 7th round, you're not too upset about getting that return on investment. And then the last question I would have that maybe Green Bay is thinking is, hey, when he was in 2019 and he had much less weight on his body, he looked much more spry, had 3 sacks, looked like he could get some penetration into the backfield. Does Green Bay maybe want to change his trajectory? Because again, even as a nose tackle this past year, he wasn't even involved in a lot of their goal line plays. So do you want to change him and say, you know what? We're not going to play you at 333 anymore. We want you to get down to a physical, svelte 295 pounds. And we want you to be able to show that you have a much quicker first step. And what if, I'm not saying that this is the case, but what if he would have been a super high-end athlete at 295 pounds, and all of a sudden that short shuttle and the 3-cone and the 40-yard dash and the 10-yard split and the vert and the broad jump, all of a sudden now tests much, much higher because he's at 290 pounds and just isn't carrying as much weight. Does Green Bay think that maybe with a little bit more functional strength and more weight training and a slimmer body, et cetera, that he can be a totally different player? So those are the 3 things. I would say either A, the light bulb goes off, B, they give him one job and try to specialize him, or C, they completely change the dynamic of who he is as a player and hope that he becomes the player that I think Miami of Florida was hoping he was going to be back at 2019. Either way, both of these players are projections. You're probably hoping to specialize them into role players. I have quite real question marks as to if either can become that, but I can understand what Green Bay was doing, taking a flyer on both in the 7th round of the draft and hoping to get some return on investment on either player. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.